Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here this beautiful Saturday afternoon. My name is Antonio Zappulla. I'm CEO at the Thomson Reuters Foundation, where we work to strengthen free, fair, and informed societies, working with journalists, working with lawyers, and working with civil society organizations. And many of you will have noticed that this year in the program, the topic of news creators, the news creator economy, has been very prevalent. And there's also been an interesting shift in narrative with a lot of discussions related to the way legacy media is no longer just competing with news creators, but actually actively attracting them into their ecosystem or even trying to become news creators, prioritizing journalism storytelling that is led by journalists and not by the brand in an environment where trust towards traditional news environment and news organizations is declining. There are obviously several questions that we want to unpack today that relate to the dynamic between independent journalists, creators, and news brands. But if you are an independent journalist who publishes and produces content online, there are, of course, significant challenges to navigate on a daily basis. There is, of course, the challenge of being outside the traditional newsroom, so not enjoying the support in terms of tech capabilities, legal support, and so on and so forth, but also the challenges of navigating the changes in algorithm determination that obviously have an impact on your audience, and then, of course, the big challenge, which is monetization of your content, and how do you obtain fair compensation and how you monetize your content. And I know compensation and fair compensation is one of the key topics that Sophia is particularly passionate about. You all know Sophia Smith Galer. She's an award-winning author. She's a journalist. She's a news creator, a journalist creator with more than 800,000 people across social media following her and trusting her for the content that Sophia produces. And also through her company, Viralect, Sophia develops tools that help journalists telling their stories online. And today we also want to talk about that. We're going to start by talking about branding, which is one of the many topics we want to discuss today, because I know, Sophia, you have very strong views when it comes to branding itself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking ahead of this about branding as a term when I was in a newsroom and outside of a newsroom. We never spoke about branding when I was at the BBC or Vice, and I was trying to think, but what did we speak that was linked to it? We talked about attribution. I think anyone here who's been at a newsroom, especially if you've ever had to edit social media video, the sort of the terror that newsrooms have is that how are people going to know this was our video that we did and not someone else's? And it's sort of, let's slap a watermark on it. With our branding on, let's slap an end slate. These are all things that I used to have to always think about adding when I had to edit, BBC videos. Never spoke about branding when I was at BBC and at Vice. I've been independent for 2.5 years now. I was an author predating my independence, as it were. I continue to be an author today. I was making content when I was a staff journalist. I still make content today. The newest thing would, yes, be the consulting company that I have where I make tools and deliver training. And still, I never think about branding in that the term personal branding is totally absent from my body of work. Why is that? I invite speculation. I think that I don't personally look at it that way because I don't see it as personal branding. I see it as journalism. I see my body of work as understanding format strategy. It is journalism, it's analysis, and it's responding and adapting to changes in the information ecosystem. I actually think it's a radical decentering. That's probably the biggest thing I've learned in the last few years. And I've learned especially since going independent, where you get to consult other companies, because if you want to do something like vertical video, which demands a great deal of unlearning from a lot of the ideas that we have from newsroom culture and journalist culture, for your product to be successful, it has to be audience first. To be honest, our journalism should have always been audience first. But vertical video really demands it, because if it's not audience first, it tanks. It actually isn't sustainable and doesn't survive if it's not audience first, if it's not a unique, proper offering. And that often means, even though you'd love to make content about this or love to make a particular video about that, if your audiences don't want it, it doesn't matter what you want. It really matters actually what your audience wants and working with them. So yes, that's the lay of the land, how I see it.
And do you think it's used in almost in a diminishing way in the news creator ecosystem by traditional media? Is it a way of basically saying this is not journalism because the word branding is used to potentially intentionally diminish the work of the people like yourself and the wider ecosystem of journalist creators?
Anecdotally, I don't think it's used about all creators. I think it's used about women. I think there is actually sometimes, I'm thinking about conversations from when Twitter was more powerful for journalism networking. And I can remember in the very early stages of building a community around my reporting and getting more than a couple of hundred followers, which is what I had been used to. And I could see how journalists who I aspired to be like, journalists who I thought were doing incredible work, incredible original journalism, and amplifying it excellently on social media. I was looking at these people as my inspiration, and I could see how they were being spoken about online, and how for women, a lot of social media content seems to be an exercise in personal branding or image management, but for men it may be entrepreneurialism, it's growth. I think I witnessed firsthand this difference in how it was handled, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's now overlapping into new developments within journalism and social media. In the creator world, I don't ever, especially in my part, which is sort of overlaps, I suppose, with more information creators, education creators. News creators don't really exist in a significant category in the creator world. Information educators, they're a big one. No one talks about personal branding. I've never heard that expression in that space.
And can I ask, what's the difference between the ecosystem that you're in and you represent towards, for example, traditional broadcasting, where you have shows called Amanpour or Anderson Cooper 360 or Sunday with Laura Kunzberg? So in that case, there is almost a desire to associate the broadcaster with a very famous journalist who obviously attracts credibility, a track record. What's the different dynamic here?
There are so many similarities to the point that I think you have to probe and look hard for the differences, because it's always been the case in TV that individuals have brought viewers in. That is why you've just described formats in which it is important for audiences to be aware you're going to see this person that you like.
Exactly.
And that may be a reason for you to tune in. And we've seen that same story get told with social media, where you will follow people because you know if you follow that particular account, you're going to get a particular person whose content you like. That's the social contract platforms should be promising us. Whether they do or not is a different story. So in that case, I don't see it as being that different at all. Even sometimes, I almost always get a question, which is, if an individual journalist builds a big following at a news organization, they're supported to build a big community around their work and their beat, specifically what they cover. What happens if they leave and they take that audience with them? That's an anxiety that newsrooms have. TV stations have always had that anxiety. That's not new. And do you know how those places keep those very talented journalists? They pay them more. They give them more IP. It's not a mystery how they keep talent. Is it a challenge to keep talent? Of course it is.
Let's talk about compensation, right? Because you just went organically into an area that I wanted to discuss with you today. So we're seeing traditional news outlets stepping in now into this territory. Before, they were maybe relegating the social media content to younger, more inexperienced, underpaid reporters, and now they are all in. They're trying to attract talent, or they're trying to become news creators themselves.
They're doing both. I can promise you they're doing both. I'm still seeing the former in a number of newsrooms.
So tell me, what's wrong from your experience, from your vantage point? What's wrong for those news organizations that are doing both, but also who's getting it right?
I believe in a world where I don't believe that every reporter should feel like they have to make vertical video if that's not what they've signed up to. So I'm a big believer in that. I'm not here saying everyone needs to be doing it. It's only those who would be comfortable doing it and have the support to do it. To suddenly put yourself online and deal with the good and the bad of being online is really significant in terms of the time investment it requires. And everything that comes with it. Even if I take a moment, I think at Perugia does an excellent job of talking a lot about negatives, online harassment. I'm happy to talk about that in this discussion, if you'd like me to. I don't hear nearly enough about the positives, but to manage the positives is really quite exhausting because you have constant, feedback on your device, and you are encouraged and indeed incentivized to be in constant communion with people who follow you and trust you. So to go back to your question was specifically about newsroom.
Who's doing it right, who's doing it wrong?
Who's doing it right and who's doing it wrong. There are newsrooms who are rightly understanding that their reporters need to know how to build an audience on social media and a community around their reporting. The newsrooms that take that seriously do so because they've taken the data seriously that shows us that when you're trying to navigate and amplify content on social media algorithms, individuals are prioritized over brands. Individuals are prioritized over brands by the platforms themselves. It's how they work. But equally, it's what audiences have told us. And we know that audiences are particularly gravitating towards creator personalities as opposed to brands on the platforms where we're seeing some of the fastest and most, significant changes in information being adopted.
When you're saying brand, you mean news outlet brands, right? In this context, or you're talking about individuals who brand?
I will never talk about an individual as a brand. If I mention a brand, I'm talking about a news publisher, yeah.
Okay. You spoke about, obviously, the algorithm compensating or giving a different treatment to individuals that are obviously producing good content. You have said in the past that being a freelancer creator and a journalist creator is more lucrative because obviously you have more control over several channels, which are obviously platforms, but also indirect revenue through books, book deals, commissioned articles. How difficult it is to get to this point, because I guess you need to invest. You spoke about the investment in time. How do you get to the point of having, a differentiated income stream, and how challenging has it been for you to get there?
The most lucrative part of the model are brand partnerships, which for traditional news parlance would be advertising. It's the evolution of that. Brand partnerships, as an example, are overwhelmingly more lucrative than if I were to write an investigation for a news outlet. In fact, it might be better for me to self-fund an investigation I want to do as a creator through brand partnerships and other work that I am doing than it would be to actually do it for a news outlet who frankly wouldn't be paying me enough to do the job. Anyone who may be a freelance journalist in this room, I'm sure, can relate to how appallingly low many freelance journalism rates are that do not fit the work that should be done. Because creators are getting all of the views at the moment, advertisers have significant resources that they want to give to creators. How can you access brand partnerships? You need to not only have a big following. If you have an organization, a company approach you, unless they have tools themselves, it's actually quite common for them to ask for an understanding of what your demographics are that you reach. They will probably do calculations behind the scenes about your engagement rate. Follower count has not been that important for quite a long time. And anyone who manages a social media account for a newsroom, if what I just said is news to you, your social media people have known that for a long time, and please get their advice, because they can tell you what is important these days and explain it to you. It's engagement rates. That's what a company would look at. They would want to see, well, if I'm paying this person thousands of dollars, am I going to get a return? Am I going to get a return on my investment? Are they going to get me X number of views? So they'll look at your Instagram and your TikTok, and they'll think, oh yeah, well, Sophia does regularly get all of those views. So yes, let's do it with her. I could have way more followers and way fewer regular high view counts and not get these same opportunities. That's the difference.
That requires skills, right? At which point you decide you need help? You need an agent, you need somebody who helps you manage your accounts, helps you, at which point do you think, I mean, I guess it's a story that varies according to individuals. So at which point did you get there? It's like, I actually now cannot do this purely on my own.
I reckon it does vary individual to individual. I also think I was very influenced by several years of staff journalism jobs, where even though in theory I was in a team, I behaved as a lone wolf. I was often, in one job, I was deployed a lot as a lone shoot edit. I was really used to working by myself and having to manage projects almost entirely by myself. For the first year that I launched a Round the World service Instagram account in the first year of its existence, and I did that all by myself. So I have a background of working quite in a sort of solitary manner, and the moment where I needed other people, it was actually a mixture of me thinking, I need help here, the business is getting too big, and people approaching you. So I was actually approached by a talent agent. I didn't find one. I was approached by one, and they seemed really good, and she is amazing, after several years with her. So for me, that is how my team currently looks.
How big is your team right now?
Well, in theory, it's kind of people who work at different companies orbiting me. It's not that I have hired people.
It's an ecosystem that you created.
Yeah, it's kind of an ecosystem. Whereas I think there are other creator journalists who have a different model because they're doing something a little bit different, which is effectively starting up a media company. And you will see as they grow, they will scale as you can predict. So they may scale. They may actually have a person internally who does the brand partnerships rather than outsourcing to a talent agent. They may, what else might they do? They might in-house have a video editor, whereas I do most of my own video editing. And currently at the moment, I have a freelancer who's supporting me on a particular project that I've got. So a lot of my work is frankly project by project, and each one will have a different sort of ecosystem of people who help me make it happen. That's the best way to describe it. I don't think how I'm doing it is usual or common.
But it works for you.
It works for me, but that's why I encourage you to sort of look at a slate of different people and figure out what you think might suit you best, because there's no blueprint for this.
When a lot of journalists decide to go solo and do what you've done, I think you've spoken around the challenges of monetization, but there's also one challenge which even traditional newsrooms are encountering more and more often, which is legal threats and suits, defamation, slaps. How do you navigate this? Do you have somebody who advises you on that? And what kind of advice do you feel you can give to people who are deciding to go solo? Because that is an emerging threat. I mean, we do a lot of work on lawfare at the foundation and monitoring where this is going. It's growing at an alarming rate. It's becoming more and more complex. Have you encountered any of these issues? And again, do you have within your ecosystem also the element of support?
So primarily I write about language and I make content about linguistics. I do work about language and languages, is sort of how I describe it. And any work that I have done that has been of let's say, a more legal sensitive nature, those are the projects that I continue to pitch to traditional media. Sometimes when people talk about my work and they say I've left traditional media and now I'm doing this thing, I don't think I ever left traditional media. I work an awful lot with them for someone who's left it. So I would bring, if I came across an investigation and I thought, whoa, I found something, I wouldn't do it by myself. I would pitch it to a news outlet and see if I could do it with them. So a lot of the content that you'll see me do, or indeed my book, that goes through a whole different, a publishing ecosystem where the publisher has a legal team. So I guess in different ecosystems I have access to, that's how I would divert certain areas of work. I can't say that week to week I am making video content under my own name, where it's sort of just me as the main operator, that sort of piques my media law training, if that makes sense. Nothing that makes me think, oh, you better be careful posting this. I don't really do content like that.
In terms of legal challenges and the legal landscape for creator journalists is changing. It's changing quite rapidly. In South Africa, for example, the South African Press Council now allows creator journalists to become members. They have to abide to the code of conduct.
That's great. That's really good.
In Denmark, the Danish Journalist Union has a dedicated creators branch with their specific code of ethics. In the Netherlands, the Dutch Journalist Union accepts news creators as full members, provided again that they abide to the same standards. And in Belgium, we're actually seeing a really interesting conversation within the traditional union, where the journalists don't want the creator journalists because they say they're not journalists. What's your view?
Well, you just reminded me, I'm a member of the NUJ, so I am also part of that infrastructure.
Can I ask, are you a member of the NUJ because you were working at the BBC before? Could you join the NUJ right now?
I was at Beck2 when I was at the BBC. That was my first ever job. So, you know, the person next to me in the office was at Beck2, so I was just like, okay, I'll join. I didn't think about it too much. Then I was not allowed to be at Beck2 when I moved to Vice, because I think Beck2 is possibly, you may know in the audience better than I do, I think it's solely for broadcasters, or I can't remember. Anyway, I joined NUJ because we had an amazing chapel, you know, NUJ chapel at Vice, who did amazing work for us. And I've stayed with them, so it's perhaps a legacy thing that I'm still with them, and I still greatly benefit from being part of the NUJ. So I am not myself familiar with how the NUJ engages with creators, and I would be very interested to hear what you just said about how, the snootiness, I would say, of journalists not wanting creator journalists on their patch. You know, it's a very dangerous attitude. It's not very collegiate. I think that journalists have a lot to learn from creators, and creators have a lot to learn from journalists. I think there's quite good partnerships that can happen.
And that's exactly what we're doing. We're bringing together creator journalists and traditional legacy journalists inspired by the trust principles of Reuters, which are timeless and really creating exactly those type of synergies that you were talking about. And part of those synergies require also technical tools. Viralect is your company. You have a tool called Sophia. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the tool does and how it's been received by the creator journalist community? What kind of impact are you achieving?
So when I left Vice to go independent, I still did not know at that point, Sophia will have an app in a year's time. Yeah, I never would have thought that, but it happened to cross over by a matter of months, essentially with the beginning of the accessible AI revolution, as I would call it. AI has been around for ages, but in terms of what everyone in this room who doesn't have a coding background can do, that's just changed so disproportionately. And within a matter of months, I basically live on Reddit as a lurker. I was reading about all these interesting things happening, and I grew to understand that people who have big sort of private data sets can use that to make tools. And I thought, well, I have all of this expertise of making videos for years under my own name. You know, I own those videos. Vice don't own them. The BBC doesn't own them. I own them. So what can I do with this data? Is there a way that I can, because I was, as soon as I went independent, I was getting inundated with requests for vertical video training and training people who, newsrooms and other companies and organizations around the world. And I thought, okay, yes, I can do a bunch of this in person, and I love doing training in person. I get a lot out of it, and it's really fun. But is there also a way where I could somehow scale that, also in a way that could be more affordable to people who can't afford my in-person training? So that was the logic behind it. I was also really worried that people were going to try and essentially copy or take my work, and I wasn't going to benefit from it, because sadly that is what has happened regarding AI development and my body of work. So like my first book was part of the pirated data set that was used to train many large language models.
How did you find out?
I found out because of journalism, because of really high quality journalism from The Atlantic, who created an interactive tool where you could search to find out if your book had been used, and I searched and I found it. And I was just really worried someone was going to do that to my TikToks and my videos. And I thought, well, I don't want someone else doing it, I better do it first. So that was also part of it. That was part of it. Anyway, fast forward. What happened next? Built a prototype, submitted that prototype to various fund awarding systems I won the big prize for innovation in the UK, the Georgina Henry Award for Women in Journalism Innovation. Got a bit of money with that. I won a place on the International Centre for Journalists Disarming Disinformation Solutions Challenge, really long name. And I was one of the winners of that. I got some money from that, and I built the app that you can now download today. And we have hundreds of paying subscribers. There have been viral videos. I only find out about the viral videos because people tell me. They say, thank you so much. I made this with Sofiana, and look what I've done. Because the data privacy is such that I do not know who my users are.
And the tool allows you to essentially put in a script, and then it allows you to just access a teleprompter, explain to me exactly what it is.
Yeah. So let's imagine I am like a women's health reporter at a newsroom, and I have just done this investigation that I'm really proud of. But I'm not Sophia. I have not spent years going viral. I actually have no idea where to start. I paste my article that I've published into the app, Sofiana, which is an iOS app, so it's only available on iPhones at the moment. It then gives you hooks to pick from. It generates hooks. Videos live and die off the quality of a hook. So you pick the hook that you think best represents your work. It then generates the rest of the script. You can go in and edit it to make sure it's in your tone, voice. Yeah. You know, there may be words you prefer to use. It gives you a fairly sort of generic broadcast standard script is how I would describe it. But it has sort of the video grammar in it, let's say, informed by my expertise, that should make it perform a lot better on social media. And then there's a teleprompter feature, so you can film it straight away. And I built it like that because I had been training and surveying loads of journalists up until that point. And whenever I asked them, oh, well, you wouldn't be at my training if you didn't want to do vertical video, so the will is there, but what has been the obstacle that means you've not done it? That's brought you to me. And the two number one obstacles were time. Journalists feel like they didn't have enough time to make TikToks and Instagram Reels, and skill. They felt like they didn't have the requisite video skill set to do it. So I knew I needed to make a tool that would ease that, sort of lubricate a journalist's entry into vertical video. And yeah, someone made a video got 450,000 views of a journalist promoting a radio documentary, and it was for this exact same strand that I used to work for at the BBC World Service. So that was really cool. There's people who've had like 4 times the usual views that they have on a video. I remember in one journalist's case, 300,000 views for a story that went on the iPapers channels, and over 7,000 scripts generated so far. So yeah,
and I guess given your concerns around copyright, I guess your app is built in a way that it doesn't train on the scripts.
Yes, in this case, we are reliant, as any journalism tool, loads of them. Currently, the model that's used is OpenAI. OpenAI have said they're not training on it, and certainly no one, I as the app owner, we are not training on what's input either. So yeah, and this work is intended for publication and video output anyway, so it's intended for, it's not private.
It's a facilitation tool.
It's been published, yeah, it's published, yeah.
I think have we got time for questions, or we up to time? We can get one question from the audience, and then we have to wrap it up because we are between you and lunch. There's one question over there. Can you identify yourself? Tell us where you're from. Thank you.
Yes. Hi, I am Paloma. I'm from Peru. I'm a journalist. I actually work in traditional media, but I also try to make content in my social media. So that's a little bit difficult, and that's my question. Is it possible to build your personal brand while working in a traditional media, or is it not very viable and it is better to do it independently? I ask because of the limitations they might impose on what you can talk about, or something as simple as a lack of time to create content.
Thank you. Very short, yes, because I did it.
All right. And I think with that...
I can expand, but yes. You can absolutely build a community around your work, do original journalism that gets seen and heard, and amplify it. Of course you can. Whether you have a newsroom that gives you resources and support to shine and bring that warm afterglow back to the
That's
newsroom,
a different story.
which is the whole point of all of this. There should be a whole forest of content that grows and supports your newsroom. That should happen. Whether that happens or doesn't is actually, for me, quite a different conversation. But for you, it's very clear. Yes.
And unfortunately, we don't have the time to have that conversation. It would require at least another half hour. But thank you for being with us. We have for time. Thank you, Sophia, for being with us.
Thank
and
you.
enjoy beautiful Perugia.
Thank you. Thank you.